This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. We end today's show on the front lines of the war in Ukraine. In the city of Mariupol, the Russian military says nearly 1,000 Ukrainian fighters surrendered in total after leaving the Azovstal steel plant, where they'd been holed up for many weeks. This comes as the New York Times reports talks to end the war have collapsed, with Russian and Ukrainian negotiators further apart from an agreement than at any other point during the war. Meanwhile, the U.S. Senate's expected to vote today to approve additional $40 billion in military and economic aid to Ukraine. On Tuesday, in a rare interview on the front lines, I spoke to the independent journalist Billy Nessen, who's in the Ukrainian town of Severodonetsk, east of Kramatorsk, which is right up against the Russian lines under constant shelling. After having some trouble connecting with him, we did manage to reach him, although there were explosions throughout the broadcast until they blew the video image off the air, though Billy could continue to speak. This is what he had to say. Billy, you just came back. Can you tell, we didn't hear a word you said. Can you tell us what you're doing there, what's happening in the city?
Okay, well, this is the explosions now, I would say probably 3 minutes, mostly shells going back and forth between the Ukrainian forces and the Russian forces. The city of 130,000 is a strategic point, a barometer of which way this thing is going to go. If the Ukrainians can hold the city, I think it's the end of any Russian advances, at least in this part of the country. And so far, the Russians have made several attempts after constant artillery barrages to get into the city over the last couple of weeks, starting about the 7th or 8th. They first came from the east, then came from the north, and then have tried to encircle the city and cut it off from the city just to its west. So there's fighting on the outskirts of the city. It's mostly an artillery duel that goes on probably 3 shells a minute, I'm counting. It'll go 24/7. The place where I sleep at night in a basement was hit by about 50 shells all around it. Even though there's no strategic, there's no military or police or anything essential to the Ukrainians, they often, besides barraging the Ukrainian forces, some days they just start shelling the city. And there seems to be no logic or reason for some of the places that they attack. They have drones operating over the city, both the Russians and Ukrainians, so they know what they're hitting and not hitting. The hospital was hit several times last week. I was in a sports palace that was hit 3 times. The office where I was working at, which is a humanitarian center, well, the back part of it was hit by a rocket. And then a few days ago, a mortar went through the roof. If I had been sitting in the chair where I usually sit, I would have been killed.
So talk about the people who are there. Do you want to put on your helmet? I mean, I can't bear to be interviewing you as we hear these explosions in the background.
Yeah, no, I'm okay. I'm okay if it gets a little bit closer. I mean, what happens here after you've been here for a little bit, you can judge what's coming in close and what's not. And the streets it's a city of 130,000. There's probably 15,000 people left. And you walk, most of the streets that I've walked down are completely empty. And occasionally you see people walking out and about. But people are used to the shelling and they can judge what's close and what's not. 100 meters, 200 meters, 300 meters, that's considered close. Half a K, no one even flinches anymore. The people who are left are overwhelmingly older people who are used to being here and don't want to leave. They're scared to leave. And accompanying them are their children who are adults, in their 40s. So you have this older population and then you have a next generation. And then complicating that is the fact that the next generation has children. So the whole family ends up staying here. And there's evacuations going on, but the people who are here right now, it's unlikely that they're going to leave. As I said, the Russians are trying to take the city, and this will be a barometer of the war.
Billy Nessen, you've had a long, storied career in journalism. You worked for the United Nations covering South Africa in South Africa. In the global South, there is a lot of criticism of the United States and NATO really provoking this war, not to say there isn't criticism of the brutality of the invasion, but the ever eastern inching of NATO toward Russia. And now you have Sweden and Finland saying they're going to join. Why did you decide to come to Ukraine?
You know, I've not only been a journalist, but I was an activist much of my life, and working and oriented toward issues of the South, or what we used to call the Third World. So I am very much attuned to that, and I'd actually put down I'd stopped working as a journalist, and I had focused on raising a family. And when Russia invaded Ukraine, I thought I had to come here. I can understand the perceptions that the South has of that this is somehow a battle of West and East, or of some part of the world versus American imperialism. But I thought, even though those issues are there, I thought there was also a Russian imperialism. And if you know the history and the perceptions of people all around Russia, you begin to understand that there is something called Russian imperialism, and at times it can be worse than American imperialism. And I thought this was one of the times.
We're talking to you right as the soldiers have given up, the Ukrainians, at the Azov steel plant in Mariupol. How much information are you getting about that? What effect does that have on the Ukrainians where you are?
Yeah, I mean, we have an internet. So I should say that we don't have cell phones, we don't have any water, we don't have electricity except a generator, and we've got this Starlink from Elon Musk is the only way that we're speaking to you. I mean, everyone's cooking outside. There's no fuel to cook. There's just wood. I saw people and filmed people cutting down dead trees today in order to cook the food. People here are staying alive because of the humanitarian aid that's coming in, and I'm speaking to you from the large center of that. So we get news from the outside, and we also hear from talking to soldiers and special forces and the police every day. People see that and that situation, Mariupol, and those people who fought there as heroes, as their lions, they call them. And it even though they have now been defeated, they see it as an enormous victory of Ukraine. If they're going to fight, they see it as an existential question. If they don't fight, then Russia's going to take over. So there's no choice for them. And they, as I say, they look to the Mariupol defenders as the heroes of this country. If Putin wanted to get rid of the Nazis, or the fascists, as he called them, Nazis are fascists, he's actually ennobled those people who, by the West, were considered, conservative or right-wing or fascist. I think that's, we get a lot more information talking to people. I've talked to people in the Azov Battalion or Brigade. They exist all throughout eastern Ukraine, and they long ago were put into the National Guard, and they're professional. And for a lot of people, the fight that they wage shows how professional they are. So I don't think
Can you talk about the Azov Battalion, the brigade? I mean, for people here who have been following it for years, it's a white supremacist right-wing brigade. And the idea that you're saying that have become mainstreamed, I mean, there was a time when the U.S. was put restrictions on weapons being sent that would end up in the hands of this brigade. Well,
listen, you know, the job first of a journalist, I think, is to communicate what the people in a place feel or think. And then secondarily is the analysis. And I think figuring out exactly who is who and what was what is something that is going to go on for a long time. If you say to them, the Azov people here, that Azov are fascists, they laugh at you. You know, or you say that fascists have a lot of support in Ukraine. People say, but the one party that was considered out of 39 parties, I think, that was considered sort of far right or fascist, got less than 2% of the vote, I think, in a field of 39 other candidates. Zelensky, he's Jewish. He won 73% of the vote in the second round. You know, I think they're probably more. One, they'll also say that here there might be some fascists, but in Russia they're in power, and they look to the vote in France, or they know about Trump, and they think, well, America and France have far more far-right people than they do in Ukraine. People laugh at it. You know, they don't have popular support at all in terms of an ideology, but they've gotten even more support, Azov, as a fighting unit. But I don't think it's a far-right battalion anymore. It once was, but it's been integrated into the army. And I think people in America and some in Europe on the left generally want to say that means that the military and then therefore the government is far right or fascist, rather than that these far right people don't dominate that battalion and don't dominate the military in any way.
Billy, I mean, I wanted to ask you about restrictions being put on you by the Ukrainian military or local officials that you can talk about.
Yeah, I'll talk about it at all. I think every journalist and photographer, videographer who's been here, and I do all three, very frustrated by it. We've been stopped from covering the war itself. No one has gotten, or rarely, it's sort of accidentally, that anyone has gotten to the front lines covering the war. They might be there in some battle or something happens, but we've been chaperoned everywhere, and I think it's a huge mistake by the Ukrainian government, and you know, that's one of the troubling things that every journalist here has encountered.
Why do they say they're imposing it, Billy?
They say either they're concerned with our safety, and we respond, but we came here knowing the danger. Whoa. That was, okay. That we know the dangers.
Why don't you put on your helmet?
You know, I'm still in a safe place, just still loud. It echoes in here. That was pretty close. So that's the first thing they say, our safety, and we try to explain, and they ignore that. And then the other thing is, you know, they're worried that that we'll give out some sort of military secrets, but which is also silly because, as I said, you have drones flying all over, and there are people, especially here, who do support Russia. So, you know, within this 10% of the population that stayed in this city, I've met a number of them who are pro-Russia, and these people will obviously give information, or not obviously, but they're more likely to give information about placement of Ukrainian troops than any of the journalists who come.
Billy's an American. Do you think the United States is doing enough to end the war, or is the U.S. helping to prolong it?
As an American, I think the right thing is to help the Ukrainians.
And if you can talk more about the civilians, go ahead.
Against an invasion, we should do everything we can to help them.
Are you the only American there? Have you seen American advisors there? Can you talk about people from around the world that you've met where you are?
Yeah. I'm in contact with some soldiers and police here. I've met, but overwhelmingly the people that I've met here in this town have been humanitarian aid workers. And they're 99% they're Ukrainians. But there are a number of, Japanese, Belgian, Swiss, American. I met the guy from Mexico today. People are still being evacuated from here, and they have to go along a road which is shelled by the Russians. So these humanitarian aid workers are very brave to drive in a big van. You're driving 20 old elderly people. That was loud. That was close.
That was very loud. We heard it, the explosion right there, and you froze for a minute.
Yeah. So I'm not seeing, the American advisors are probably here. I mean, and I'm sure they're giving them real-time access to every bit of information that the American satellites and European, British spy satellites and other means are able to gather. Obviously, the West is determined that Ukraine has to win this war. Our listeners or viewers might have different feelings about that, but I think it's clear that the determination is there, and we're not seeing obviously a lot of what's going on. There have been foreign fighters here, but I think a lot of them are, from what I hear from Ukrainians, not very effective ones. There are probably some. It's mostly not special forces.
Billy?
Yeah.
Billy, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. Just right next door to us.
My God.
That landed right here.
Billy, your helmet.
Yeah, I'm inside now. Whoa.
Tell us what's happening. Just describe it to us, even though we don't have an image. I can hear you.
Explosion right next door. We don't have a video?
No, we don't have video right now.
No, explosion, the smoke all up and down. The shell hit right next door this building.
It looks like your camera turned off.
Yeah, I don't know, all sorts of things. I don't know what happened, but whoa, that's very close, within 100 meters, less than 50 meters away.
We can.
That's where there's a lot of. That's where there's a lot of people sort of camped out in a bunker over there. People have been made homeless right where it hit. There's no military targets over there. This is ridiculous.
And again, describe where you are. Talk about the hospital.
I'm in a humanitarian aid center. And just 50 meters or 100 meters away is where a lot of people are living underground. And that's where that shell hit. It's an empty lot with people cooking outside.
Do you see people fleeing, scattering?
No, I can't see because it's blocked by the truck. But it's all smoke. You can't see anything. They're not going to just hit one shell here. We gotta go inside. Yeah.
Billy, should we let you go so that you can deal with everything?
No, it's okay. It's okay. That hit right. I mean, I was the closest person to it. So, what else do you? I'm sorry. What else do you want to ask?
Do you have the sense that the Russians, like NATO and Ukraine working together, do you have the sense that they know what they're hitting?
They know what they're hitting. They've got drones all over the city. They know exactly what they're hitting. These are not mistakes. This is their... 99% of the shells are hitting Ukrainian troops, but 1% is enough to kill lots of people here. This isn't where there's basically homeless people. It's like, you know, a Plaza Moscone Center, you know.
Are there many children left there?
Yeah, there are children there. Anyway, that's homeless people over there, old people.
And the hospital that has been hit a number of times, is it still functioning? Yeah. Is it the only hospital in Severodonetsk?
There's two. There's a military hospital. They keep hitting the civilian hospital. You know, they know it's a big building. I mean, there's no mistakes here. You know, there's drones flying. Yesterday, I saw a unit of Ukrainians shooting down a drone. I heard a buzzing in the air. You know, that's a drone. And Ukrainians shot it out of the air. I was there. So they know exactly what they're doing. I mean, they could level this town, and they're not doing that. But 1%, so every building in the city has its windows have been broken. Almost every block, there's been an explosion. A rocket or artillery or mortar round has landed. You know, it's not level, but this is like, you know, slow motion. You know, mass destruction of the city.
Did we lose Billy? Billy, if you're speaking, we don't hear you. After that, we lost contact with independent journalist Billy Nessen, who's in the Ukrainian city of Severodonetsk, right up against the Russian lines under constant shelling. It's the easternmost city still held by Ukrainian forces after almost 3 months of war. We later did hear from him yesterday that he was okay, at least for now. We've tried to reach him today, and we haven't been able to reach him yet. That does it for today's show. Special thanks to Renee Feltz and Hani Massoud. Very happy birthday, belated, to Erin Dooley. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Thank you.